Do you remember as a child whining to your parents or to a teacher, "My brother won't play with me," or "My sister won't play with me," or "My friends won't play the game I want to play"? Do you remember that? And have you still got children or grandchildren who do that sometimes? In our household, we all refuse to play Monopoly because Miriam always wins. And so she could be the one who's always whining, "I want to play Monopoly," and we'd all go, no, we've been there, done that. Jesus is thinking of that kind of a situation when he says, it's like children sitting in the marketplaces and calling to one another, "We played the flute for you and you wouldn't dance. We wailed and you didn't mourn." Children playing games or playing instruments. Who's going to join in the game? Who will dance to their tune? Who gets to decide on the game? Jesus uses that as an example to describe the generation he sees before him. People confused by him and in contrast by John the Baptist. Two figures that they have in front of them and they don't quite know which is right or which to follow. John the Baptist on the one hand, who lived in the desert and, ate locusts and certainly never partied. And Jesus, who parties all the time and eats and drinks with sinners. So I guess John the Baptist is the wailing one in the children's game and Jesus is the playing the flute one. And people just don't get it. They're not sure who to follow. And it seems especially the Pharisees, the wise ones, the leaders, the educated, they are especially confused by these two models. Who are they going to follow? Jesus says it's rather the children, those with no education, who understand him and who are prepared to throw in their lot with him. Maybe they've got less to lose, and so they have the eyes to see the truth of who Jesus is. But the Pharisees and the scribes and the power brokers, they were expecting a Messiah who would conform to their expectation, who would dance to their tune. He would be the one to overthrow the Roman Empire and to confirm their authority. But of course, that's not the Messiah they get in Jesus. He's rather the one spoken about by the prophet Zechariah, who's going to enter Jerusalem in humility on a donkey, not on a horse of war. It's a passage from Zechariah normally set down for Palm Sunday, but we hear it again today to help us define the kind of Messiah the people are going to get. The kind of person who's going to bring peace and set the prisoners free. It's his humility and service that's going to bring the freedom, not power over and against someone else. So this question of who do we follow? To whom do we listen? Whose tune do we dance to? Well, it's not just a question for the people of Jesus' time, it's a question for us today, every day. Literally, who do we follow on social media? Which news outlets do we listen to? Which posts? Which blogs? Where do we get our information from? In my recent time in the United States, I was acutely aware of their 24-hour stream of news, and where channels like CNN are focused on nothing else but their president. They seem to have abandoned the idea of that kind of 5-minute top of the hour news items. It was non-stop political commentary. You could turn it on at 9 o'clock in the morning and it would just be kind of carrying on from the night before. They didn't stop. What was interesting, though, was that the print media was having a resurgence. The wonderful New York Times and Washington Post were going up in subscribers. So people were choosing to follow something of what they had to say. And while I was away, I was also following the story in the media back here about the particularly drawn-out struggle over Christchurch Cathedral. What to do? Rebuild as the old building, rebuild a new building, do something else altogether. And then this week, when the government increased its offer to the Christchurch diocese to try and force their hand, I wrote a blog finally reflecting on the issues. I felt like I had something to say. And I got a lot of responses, and the Christchurch Press even published it. And I was prepared for lots of negative reaction because it's a pretty hot topic. But my questions around the role of church and society and how they work together seemed to strike a chord with people. I talked a little bit about the old age of Christendom, the time when society and church were together, or even the state and the church were together. But I pointed out that the age of Christendom is long gone, sometime in the middle of last century, and yet here we have the government trying, I think, to preserve a Christendom model of the church for the sake of the tourists and the heart of the city. We have to have our old building as it was, or the heart of the city in Christchurch won't be there anymore. And they want to spend over $100 million doing it. So the Christchurch Synod has some tough choices. Who are they going to follow? Are they going to follow the money? What are they going to do? And I also said, imagine if it was us. Imagine if we had to rebuild our beloved church after an earthquake and the government was offering us the money. It would be really, really hard to say no. How would we discern what to do? So we need to keep the members of the Christchurch Synod and the diocese in our prayers over the next few weeks as they come to make this really tough decision. But in our own lives, where we have smaller decisions to make than whether to rebuild a cathedral or not, we still every day have to make decisions. Who do we follow? Who guides us in our choices? Is it our family? Is it our friends, our work colleagues? Is it politicians? When we have a choice to make at work, who guides us? When we have a choice to make at home, who guides us? I know that while I've been away, you've had 3 of our parishioners sharing some of their life story with you. And they each gave examples of the focus and choice of their lives and points in their lives where they've made a turning or taken a new journey. If we want to be guided by our faith and by the Spirit, how do we make that real? In our reading of Scripture and in our prayer lives, how do we discern the Spirit's call? Well, Jesus offers an image to his listeners. He offers those beautiful words, "Come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." That image of the yoke has quite a few layers to it. First of all, he's literally talking about the yoke that a horse or an oxen would use to pull a load in ploughing a field, the kind of farming in their time. A horse or an oxen ploughing the field. But then there's another layer, the Torah or the law that was so assiduously followed by the Pharisees was also called a yoke, the yoke of the law. Now the intention was that the law would be a framework to live by, a way to order community and relationships so people could be in a right relationship with each other and with God. But the law had become really heavy. It had got weighed down with details and rules, and it had become a heavy yoke on the shoulders of the people, and so it had become a burden. So Jesus invites the ones carrying this heavy burden to come to him, and the ones with the heaviest burden were the leaders and the scribes and the Pharisees. He's inviting them to come to Jesus instead and try on his yoke for size, something that would have offended them quite a lot, I'm sure. And he says his yoke is easy, which doesn't mean that it's simple, but it means it's a correct fit, it's a good fit, it's going to fit well. And how many places were there in the yoke of the oxen or the horse of Jesus' time? There were 2. They always worked in pairs. So 2 to carry the burden. One place in the yoke for you and another place for the one who walks along beside you. Maybe a friend or a lover or a family member, a spiritual companion, or perhaps Jesus himself is in the other side of the yoke. And the yoke fits and the burden is lightened by that companionship. And Jesus says we're to learn from the humble one on the donkey, who is gentle and who gives us rest. So our work of discernment is done with companions, with the Spirit of Jesus walking alongside. And Jesus doesn't say you must dance to this tune or dance to that tune, like the children playing their games or like the Pharisees laying down the law. There's not one way, there's not one set of rules. But there is a path to find and a way to walk and plenty of dances to dance. One of the questions that I've returned with from my sabbatical is, how can we better be companions to each other in our faith journey? How can we walk alongside each other better in this community here at St. Matthew's? Well, today, Jesus invites us to walk together and to take his yoke, which fits well and which leads us in a way that is full of gentleness and humility.